There she blows. We've renamed it Coilzilla. There it is, deconstructed, look, ready for the next time we go out. Oh, about 5 months ago, I did 2 videos about ultra deep settings on the Manticore and the Deus 2. But those videos are still really popular. So I thought, well, why don't I carry on? Why don't I carry on doing it? So today I'm going to do the Simplex Plus, the first one. I think it's the first Simplex. Not entirely sure, I haven't got one. But ultra deep settings, looking for coin hoards. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to do, I've made a document, so I'll put that in the description that you can download, and I'm going to go over to Notebook LM with the man and the woman chatting about ultra deep settings of the Simplex. Put it in the comments below what metal detector you want to do next, or I'll do next, or what I should do next. Right, let's check it out. Oh, before I forget, I'm going to put on some random video of me and Sean pulling Coilzilla. And don't forget, at the end, you'll find the document in the video description.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we've got something pretty specialized lined up. We're digging into a stack of really advanced material, all about getting the absolute max depth from the Nokta Simplex plus the 12 kilohertz one. And this isn't your everyday coin shooting guide. No, this is specifically tailored for finding those big, deep, buried coin hoards, the kind of find everyone dreams about. So let's unpack this because it feels like a fundamental shift. Usually you hear advice about getting clean signals, right? Stable VDIs, numbers on the screen, making sure it's quiet. But the research we've got here, it suggests something totally different, almost backwards, actually. It seems the settings that really push the machine to its deepest physical limits are also the perfect ones for finding these massive clustered hoards.
That's exactly it. We have to completely shift how we think about the target. You need to stop thinking of a deep hoard as just, a bunch of separate little coin signals. What's really fascinating and maybe a bit counterintuitive is that getting this kind of depth often means doing things that go against standard advice.
Yeah.
You're not aiming for a quiet machine anymore. You need to run it right on the edge where it's almost unstable.
Okay.
And the reason boils down to a really key difference in the signal itself. A deep hoard, it doesn't give you that sharp, high-pitched ping, like a single coin near the surface. If you're just listening for that classic sound, honestly, you'll walk right over these deep ones. Instead, that big cluster of metal creates this broad, almost mellow lift in the audio. It's subtle.
A lift.
Yeah, a lift or a swell in the sound. And it's super easy to miss if you've got too much filtering or discrimination dialed in. So you need a very specific setup, one that's tuned to catch that wider, softer audio footprint.
Okay, right. So if it's not just a louder coin signal, what is it physically? What's the signature we're actually hunting for down there?
It all comes down to the physics of what's called a mass target. See, when you get a bunch of coins packed together, especially if they've been buried for ages and started to oxidize and sort of meld together, they stop acting like individual little pieces of metal. They form this single cohesive blob, electrically speaking, a mass target. And that mass distorts the detector's electromagnetic field in a really specific way. It creates a wider, smoother response zone.
Wider and smoother. Okay.
Exactly. The signal itself is inherently broader, softer around the edges. And here's the kicker, the big problem. That kind of broad, fuzzy signal. If you've got your discrimination turned on, the machine can easily misinterpret it. It might read it as deep iron because the signal edges aren't sharp like a coin's. The filtering just cuts it off or misidentifies it.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
And that explains the #1 recommendation in this whole guide, right? Running in all metal mode.
Precisely. All metal lets the detector process those big, complex, wide waveforms without chopping them up or filtering them out based on conductivity guesses.
Hold on, though. All metal. I mean, that goes against everything we usually hear for trashy sites or even just noisy ground. If we're running all metal and pushing the machine to the edge of stability, like you said, aren't we just setting ourselves up to dig tons of junk? Deep iron, false signals. How do you filter that mentally?
That is absolutely the right question to ask. And the guide, well, it doesn't shy away from it. It basically accepts, yes, you will hear more noise. You'll hear more chatter, maybe some pops from iron.
Okay.
But the goal isn't a clean VDI number. Forget the numbers. They'll likely be jumpy or just disappear entirely at these depths anyway. Instead, you have to train your ear. Focus intensely on that crucial audio cue we talked about.
The lift.
The lift, exactly. Or maybe a wobble or a swell in the threshold hum that's repeatable as you sweep over the spot. The machine might be chattering away in the background, but the Hoard signal will consistently lift that baseline audio over a wider area. The real filtering happens between your ears, based on the quality and repeatability of that sound, not in the machine circuits.
Okay, got it. So let's crystallize this. Based on that physics, the source material lays out 4 universal rules, the golden quartet, let's call them, the absolute must-dos for pushing the Simplex Plus to its max depth, no matter the soil.
Right. And the first one, probably the most obvious but also easily misunderstood, is sensitivity.
Crank it up.
Crank it way up, as high as you can possibly stand it, basically until the chatter becomes constant, unbearable noise. Then just back it off 1, maybe 2 clicks. That's it.
So it should be noisy.
It should be alive, slightly unstable. You want maximum signal reception, even if that means letting some background noise in. You're riding the edge.
Okay, number 2, and this sounds like the real killer for Hoard signals, discrimination or notch.
Yeah, the instruction here is blunt. Keep it minimal. Or ideally, just switch it off entirely. Run in all metal.
Why so strict?
Because, like we said, Hoards blend conductor signals. They create that complex, wide signal. Any kind of electronic filter trying to sort conductivity, your standard discrimination or notch, it's just going to get confused by that Hoard signal.
And that costs depth.
Immediately. Significant depth loss. You are consciously trading away any hope of a reliable VDI number for raw depth potential. All metal is key.
Makes sense. Third pillar.
The threshold, that background hum. You need it set so it's just audible, like barely there, but constant.
Not too loud, not silent.
Exactly. If it's too loud, it'll drown out those super faint, subtle lifts from a really deep hoard. But if it's off or too low, you lose your reference point entirely. You need that steady hum so you can actually hear the slight change, that wobble or breathing sound when you sweep over the deep mass.
Okay. And the final piece of the quartet, ground balance. GB.
Yes, and the sources are really emphatic about this. You must perform a manual pump ground balance on a clean patch of ground before you start searching each new area.
Every single time. Even on, say, mild pasture land where you think it's fine.
Every single time. Mandatory. Don't rely on the factory preset or just hitting the auto track button. Manual pump balance.
Why the big emphasis on manual GB? Isn't the factory setting usually pretty good?
It's usually conservative, safe. The manual GB, done properly, it does more than just cancel out the ground minerals. The guide suggests it actually removes unnecessary signal damping. It's about, and this is a quote, releasing hidden gain.
Releasing hidden gain. Wow. So it's not just noise cancellation. It's actually boosting the detector's potential.
That's the implication. It's a critical step that apparently separates just good depth from that absolute maximum ultra deep performance. It tunes the machine precisely to that specific patch of ground, wringing out every last bit of depth.
We should probably pause here, too, and talk technique. Because you can have the settings dialed in perfectly, but if you're not swinging the coil right...
Oh, absolutely critical. Sweep speed, it's non-negotiable for these deep targets. You have to slow, way down.
Like how slow?
Painfully slow, deliberate. Make sure your sweeps overlap significantly, maybe by 50% or more. Deep targets, especially these wide, faint Hoard signals, they need time. The detector's processor needs time to register and integrate that soft, wide audio footprint.
So no rushing.
Definitely not. If you're sweeping at your normal coin shooting pace, you'll just walk right over them. You won't give the machine, or your own brain, frankly, enough time to even notice that subtle rise in the threshold. You probably need to cut your usual speed in half at least. Slow and low.
Okay, that's a really practical point. So we have this golden quartet of settings, this slow sweep speed, but ground conditions vary hugely. How do we adapt this core setup when we're actually out there? The sources gave specific profiles, right?
Yeah, 3 main ones. Let's start with the kind of ideal scenario.
Right.
Pasture. Old fields, generally low to moderate trash levels.
Okay, what's the setup there?
Here you stick pretty close to the core principles, definitely all metal mode. And if you have it, the recommendation is the big FP35 coil. That's the large 13.5 by 12.5 inch double D.
Why the big coil specifically?
The thinking is its size creates a wider electromagnetic field, better coupling with the ground, to fully energize that potentially large, deep mass target. In pasture, the ground is often consistently moist, stable, and coins have had centuries maybe to oxidize together, forming that perfect coherent signal mass we talked about.
Right, and the all-metal keeps those broad tones audible.
Exactly. Now, the big decision here was purely audio. Forget VDI. You're listening for that soft, repeatable lift or swell in the threshold hum, but spread over a decent area, maybe 30 to 60 centimeters across, a foot or two.
And you mentioned cross-checking.
Absolutely mandatory. Once you pinpoint the center, rotate your sweep 90 degrees and check it again. Does the signal hold up? Is it still consistent? The source is crystal clear on this. Expect no VDI, but consistent tone that holds up when cross-checked easily, likely deep mass.
That's your dig signal.
Okay, pasture sounds manageable if you're patient. What about the tough stuff? Mineralized ground, red clay, soil heavy with iron, maybe volcanic areas, hot ground. All metal might just scream constantly there. Correct. You likely can't run all metal effectively in highly mineralized conditions. It'll just be overloaded. So you have to adapt. The recommendation is to switch modes. Try field mode or maybe even beach mode, even if you're inland.
Beach mode inland, really?
Yeah, because those modes have more sophisticated ground balancing algorithms and some built-in filtering designed to handle challenging conditions, saltwater in beach mode, general mineralization in field. They offer more stability.
And coil choice changes, too.
Definitely. You generally want to go smaller here. The SP28, the standard 11-inch coil, or even the smaller SP24, the 9.5-inch one.
Why smaller? I thought bigger was better for depth.
Not in hot ground. A massive coil like the SP35 will couple too much with all those ground minerals. It essentially picks up too much ground noise, making it unstable and masking faint targets. A smaller coil reduces that ground effect, managing the noise better while still having enough punch for a deep, coherent Hoard signal, which stands out more against the reduced ground chatter.
Okay, that makes sense. Less ground signal, more target signal comparatively. And there was a pro tip for ground balancing in these tricky soils.
Yes, really useful one. When you do your manual pump balance, do it with the sensitivity set somewhere in the middle range first. Get a good, stable balance. Then once it's balanced, crank the sensitivity back up towards the maximum.
Ah, why do it that way?
It helps prevent the machine from overbalancing. If you try to balance with sensitivity already maxed out on really hot ground, the machine might filter out too much, potentially weakening faint target signals near the fringe depth. Balancing at mid-sensitivity first gives you a more accurate ground reading, then you push the gain for depth, resulting in, hopefully, more stable faint signals.
Gotcha. So the idea behind using field or beach mode here is that they apply some necessary filtering for stability, but crucially, they're still designed to let those large, strong, coherent signals like Hoard punch through the mineralization noise where a smaller target might get lost.
Exactly. They filter the chatter, but hopefully preserve the mass signal.
Okay, last scenario. The beach. Specifically that tricky zone where wet salt sand meets dry sand.
Right. Here, the dedicated beach mode is essential, and the absolute key step is performing your manual ground balance right on the wet sand line, or even just into the wet sand itself, not on the dry sand.
Why the wet sand specifically?
Because that's where the conductivity is highest and most challenging due to the salt water. You need to tell the machine that's the condition it needs to handle. Balancing on dry sand won't properly calibrate it for the wet stuff where targets might lie.
And the source had an interesting insight about where Hoards might actually end up on beaches.
Yeah, it's a good point for anyone learning. Hoards don't usually just flow around randomly in deep sand forever. Tides and time tend to make them settle down until they hit something solid. Often they collect where there's underlying bedrock, or maybe a layer of dense clay closer to the surface. They get trapped in hollows or crevices in that harder layer.
So even on a sandy beach, you're looking for spots with structure underneath.
Pretty much. And the Simplex's beach mode is great here because it's designed to stabilize the machine against those constantly shifting conductivity levels from the saltwater. This lets you run the high gain, high sensitivity needed to punch down through potentially compacted sand layers to reach those trapped targets.
And the sound we're listening for on the beach, similar to pasture.
Similar, yes, but maybe even more critical to pick out from the background noise, which can still be present. You're listening for those mellow, rounded tones. Again, probably tone-only responses with a jumpy VDI or no VDI at all. If that sound is repeatable, and especially if it passes the 90-degree cross-check, the advice is clear. Dig it.
Okay, we've set up the machine perfectly. High gain, all metal or the right mode, threshold humming nicely, slow sweep. Now, if we're deliberately not listening for that sharp coin ping, what exactly does the definitive audio evidence for a deep Hoard sound like? What should really make your ears perk up?
It is subtle. You're listening for nuances. The sources highlight three main things to recognize. First, that broad, soft rise in the threshold we keep mentioning. It happens over several inches of your coil sweep, not just a tiny pinpoint spot.
Okay, width is key.
Width and softness. Second, sometimes it's described as a faint threshold breathing, like the hum swells gently and then fades back, rather than a distinct beep, a slow in and out.
Breathing. Interesting description.
And third, this is a good one, listen for signals that actually seem to get clearer or maybe slightly sharper, higher pitched, after you carefully remove the top layer of turf, or maybe scrape away a few inches of topsoil, or even sometimes after you recheck your ground balance right over the spot.
Removing that surface interference lets the deeper signal come through better.
Precisely. It suggests the signal source is strong, but deep.
Which brings us back to that mandatory validation routine, the cross-check. We're running hot, possibly in all metal, so we know we'll hit iron. Why is that 90-degree swing so vital for sorting Hoards from junk?
It's your primary manual filter, your lie detector, basically. A genuine, large, coherent Hoard signal, even if it's deep and faint, should remain pretty consistent, maybe slightly weaker, but still clearly there and spread out when you sweep it from 90 degrees.
And iron doesn't do that.
Deep iron or weird pockets of mineralization. Their signals tend to be messy, maybe elongated in one direction. When you rotate the coil 90 degrees, those signals often just completely break up, become choppy, narrow significantly, or even disappear altogether. The Hoard signal has body in all directions. The junk signal often doesn't. That's how you tell the difference when the VDI is useless.
And speaking of useless VDIs, if someone listening is getting worried because they're not getting any numbers or the numbers are all over the place.
The guidance is really straightforward. VDI loss is normal, expected even. Once targets get beyond a certain depth relative to their size and the machine's power, the VDI just can't resolve them accurately. Don't chase the numbers. Don't rely on them.
Yeah.
Trust that repeatable, soft, broad tone, especially if it holds up on the 90-degree check. The tone is everything at these depths.
Right. So if we boil down this whole ultra-depth approach, the core idea, the philosophy behind it all seems to be you're trading comfort for capability.
That's a great way to put it.
You're giving up the comfort of a nice, quiet, stable machine with reliable numbers, and instead you're pushing for raw, absolute maximum depth reach. The Simplex, plus, according to these sources, it's meant to be pushed. It needs to be, quote, running on the edge, slightly chatty, alive, and tuned precisely to your soil.
Yeah, and if you connect that to the bigger picture, that whole philosophy is kind of summed up in one great quote from the material. A calm machine is nice. A nearly calm machine often finds the Hoard.
I like that. Nearly calm.
It's really an encouragement, isn't it? To think critically about how your gear actually works in the real world, how it interacts with the ground, instead of just relying on default settings or chasing that perfectly silent operation.
That specific point about manual ground balance, especially on just average pasture, the idea that it's not just about canceling noise, but about releasing hidden gain.
Yeah.
That really reframes how you think about a basic function.
It absolutely does. It shifts the focus from just achieving stability to actively seeking peak performance. It's about unlocking potential, not just eliminating interference.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other common assumptions, maybe in your own detecting techniques or even, navigating your job or other parts of life, what assumptions might be unintentionally damping down the real performance of your tools or maybe even your own potential?
That's a deep thought to end on.
It is. It's something to mull over. That's the kind of thinking this deep dive encourages. We'll leave you with that until our next one.